where I left him.
Billy and Mandy has always been one of the most existential cartoons I've ever seen. Like, Courage the Cowardly Dog, they really tackled horror, did a good job at making things nightmare fuel. And Ed, Edd n Eddy did a good job at, like, making comedy and characters work really well. And I feel like the Grim Adventures are just a sum up of both of those shows, just like brought to a 10, and add like really grotesque imagery, a mockery of like myth and legends, and just add the underworld, and you've got this like crazy concoction of a Hansel and Gretel like comedy. Cartoon Network must have known what they were doing with Maxwell Adams, because if you've ever like seen this guy or heard about like his personality, he's just like a very existential thinker, with a lot of his art having to do with mortality somehow being bent. He did a lot of other Cartoon Network shows and even does a podcast currently, which I love to watch. If you haven't checked it out, please check out Maxwell Adams. And he's always been very generous about sharing his behind the scenes process, like old art and how he came up with a bunch of different ideas. And his story is just so unique. You know, like he had such an interesting view of the world in a way that Cartoon Network just like was definitely vibing with at the time.
The three of us have lots of fun together. Like messing with werewolves or making giant monsters.
Come on now.
He's right, Grim. You do introduce us to a lot of interesting characters.
If you grew up with watching any of these 6 seasons, you'll know that it started out a lot darker and just became a more ensemble-like show with a lot of extra characters that add really fun depth to it. Like, for example, there's Eris, the Princess of Chaos, and she makes a couple returns. There's Hoss Delgado, who is a monster hunter that hunts down people like Grimm. And one of my favorites, Dracula, which is just an old man, essentially. The way they paint these worlds are not just like dark and gruesome, but they're funny and grounded in a weird, twisted way. Regular Show would be one of these weird out-of-body experiences that like capitalized on a format like this, but this was like the very origin of Cartoon Network going off the walls with the dark type stuff. Since the creator is so open about like the process of how he came up with this show, it wasn't hard for me to find character model sheets, old premises, and cool ideas that were thought up of before the show became as popular as it did. If you guys can remember, it started out as a different show, Grim and Evil, with its first season being broken down. You could learn more about that as I cover it in my first season retrospective. And yeah, it's really confusing how it got to through its development process. It was originally a spin-off of a show called Evil Con Carne, which is actually about just like group of supervillains, which all make an appearance back on Billy and Mandy eventually, as you could recall their familiar faces. But yeah, I want to go back to a time where none of this stuff was ever fully developed yet, and we're still looking at these characters as if they're new people to the screen, and this is a show that we're not sure is going to work. Yeah, so let's jump into the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy's original pitch Bible. So what's a production Bible? First off, it goes by a couple of different names. Different networks call them different things based on how they develop the show. Some shows start out just with a pilot, some start out just with a production Bible. Others might not have any of these documents and just go right to series. The point of this document is to communicate the spirit of the show within words and pictures, so that way any of the writers on the staff can have the consistent voice that the main brain power has. Usually it consists of the premise and format, like how the show is structured and what it's about. Then we have the character biographies, which is a little bit of a deep dive on what these people mean to the story and to each other, and just like what their quirks are, like what makes them a flawed character, what makes their goals important, a lot of the stuff you actually go into a show wanting to see. We got world rules and backstory, which is always important, especially for a show like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where you need to know what happened with the war, where some might actually be less important, like Camp Lazlo, for example. Like, they don't need to go into the backstory, while shows like SpongeBob or Adventure Time do have this connective tissue to it. One of the most important parts of these things are the season or episode outlines, which actually really break down the structure of what's supposed to happen in every episode, which is, to me, the core anatomy of a TV show. We've gone over Camp Lazlo, Ed, Edd and Eddy, even Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, but the pitch Bible for Grim Adventures is a little bit different. Yeah, we get our character model sheets, that's definitely it. It's more so where the expectations started versus where it ended up. I feel like Ed, Edd and Eddy and Camp Lazlo definitely became exactly like what they preached. Same thing with Foster's Home, but they only really talked about their characters because it was a very character-driven Bible. This one's a very, like, animated-driven Bible. A lot of notes on the way their eyes should look, how they react to certain situations. Like, it's very focused on, like, the physical comedy of it all, which I really appreciate, especially since, like, the other ones lean into something different. I found a pitch page online called the Infernal Main Model Pack, which is more so all the drawings that Maxwell Adams was intending to share. But that one was, like, updated a bunch of times. Like, it's definitely the series Bible going forward. I'm talking about going back to the original pitch. Yeah. So we're going to go back even further than this Infernal Party Pack to even before when Maxwell Adams started sharing all this stuff. So we got the first page. It just says Billy and Mandy. It doesn't say the Grim Adventures. And yeah, we got the skeleton with his scythe. And yeah, the lines are drawn a little bit more exaggeratedly. Like, I feel like it seems like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon instead of necessarily a Cartoon Network one, but that would make sense because it started out being more that network than it did this one. You know, like Johnny Test, Ed, Edd and Eddy, like, these were earlier signs of what Billy and Mandy would eventually be. And this one was trademarked in 1998, so you know it was like one of the original 90s shows that you'd grow up watching in the 2000s. Billy kind of looks more like a monkey, which I thought he had a tail, but it turns out to just be Grimm's overcoat being stretched a little too long. Mandy looks completely different, also kind of like a monkey. What is with these monkey vibes? I swear, these kids are so little. But I like that Mandy's already frowning, even from the first draft. Like, that just shows how in tune he was with what wanted to happen. And I hope that, like, they mention that Mandy was super evil from the very beginning. Like, that's something I'm looking forward to. Grimm being so serious is interesting. I wonder if they intended him to be like this goofball or eventually the straight man in this trio dynamic. But yeah, Billy being stupid is probably one of the funniest things that motivate the show anyway, so I would be surprised. The description is, little kids have a lot to deal with growing up. Friends, bullies, who gets to watch what show on TV, but they also have to worry about closet monsters and that funny sound in the attic. Billy and Mandy are no different, except they have a very unusual best friend, the Grim Reaper. Through him, they meet the monsters, aliens, and mythical characters that populate his world. While the adults right now might not notice, it's absolutely real to Billy and Mandy. Ooh, already off to a great start. I feel like that's the perfect pitch. Like, they always start these cartoons with something in related to a normal, grounded kid-like experience. Like, with Ed and Eddy, they were focused on growing up in the cul-de-sac. With Camp Lazlo, they were talking about summer camp. There's always, like, a real element that grounds, like, puberty or, like, actual issues kids are going through, because that's just what the network had. You know, like, if you're focused on ages 7 to 11, of course you want to make stories that they could relate to. And this one, despite the fact that you have literally the Grim Reaper being a part of it, it's just so down to earth. That's when we get Billy's original character description, which, by the way, all the colors are so significantly different. Like, it doesn't even look like the original show anymore, especially with the skull background. Like, it makes me think, like, this was before they actually got committed to Grimm's interpretation of a skeleton. So this is what it reads. Sure, he might not be the smartest kid in school, or the best athlete, or the best at anything else. At least Billy is happy being who he is. Like a dog, he's loyal, perpetually happy, and loves to play. He genuinely likes his neighbor Mandy, and takes her abuse and degrading remarks without complaint. He thinks Grimm is just about the coolest guy in the world, often calling him the G-Man, while he's trying to show off. Billy's a bit of a mama's boy. If his mom tells him to come home and eat his liver and onions at 5, Billy will be there by 4:30. In fact, Billy's only fear is upsetting his mom. Billy's a catalyst for action in the show. His clumsiness and curiosity are constantly getting him and his best friends into trouble. And I like how he kind of has like a sinister look to him, like any of this is what he does on purpose, when really the show just dumps him down further and further, with less interest in being about him caring about his mom, just being inconsiderate for the fact of for the sake of being inconsiderate. Like, Billy just goes off the walls with some of the stuff he does. And it's interesting to think that, like, Grimm is kind of a secret in the earlier version of these pitch pages, because I'm getting the impression that, like, the world doesn't know all the connections that it has to the underworld, especially since that became more of, like, a recurring thing by season 2. So yeah, it's so interesting they didn't account for that quite yet. I feel like Billy's personality has changed a lot since what I'm seeing here, and it's better because it, like, contrasts with Mandy, like, the more positive he is and the more goofy, with his relationship with Grimm always being casual. It seemed like they knew that he would just not take Grimm seriously ever, which is the perfect relationship to have a show that's so dark and somebody who just doesn't see it that way. At least, like, they show that he's confident and he's sure of himself, despite the fact he's, like, so ridiculously dumb. And then we got some character models for Billy. Like, we get to see what they originally intended him to have his reactions with. I also took some of these from the animated model pack, so, like, these are images that the writers and animators for the show would get if they were, like, coming to be on the show just for an episode or, like, just a few episodes. Like, it definitely paints a picture of what kind of show you're writing for. I'm not sure if you saw my Ed and Eddie retrospective, but they even had, like, the animation test that the writers would do before they got a job on the specific show. I didn't find anything like that for Billy and Mandy, but it is interesting to see how they were intending on this going. Like, Billy looks like a very specific way, and they even have limitations as to how they want him to be portrayed. Having him being, like, such an idiot is, like, such a very specific type of personality quirk. They want to be, like, very meticulous about it. Especially when we start talking about Mandy, for example. So yeah, Mandy's original character description is as follows. Playing straight man to Billy is his unsmiling neighbor and friend Mandy. Ooh, I like that right off the bat that they said she doesn't smile. This also feels like a My Life as a Teenage Robot sketch. Like, I feel like the animation seems a little bit more 60s or, like, early Disney as opposed to what it ended up being. Like, more Courage the Cowardly Dog or, like, Scooby-Doo-esque. Like, this definitely had, like, a lot friendlier of vibes. I feel like Maxwell Adams knew it was, like, a cartoony show, so, like, he wanted to, like, fit that model. Mandy's one goal in life is to establish and retain control over everything. She's a control freak. She has no need to resort to shouting or physical violence to get her way. Through her cold, deadpan remarks, she can bend anyone or anything against her will, and she's proud of this talent. Mandy's parents seem to know she's in control, and they let her pretty much do whatever she wants. She's also the one person who could frighten death himself. Mandy sees Grimm as a challenge. When Grimm doesn't do what Mandy wants him to do, conflict ensues, and Mandy invariably comes out on top. Oh, interesting. Like, I feel like just by saying this stuff, you're saying that Mandy is always going to be in control, always in power. Like, they always intended her on being the center of everything that happens. And it's funny that they call her straight man, because I definitely see Grimm more as that. Like, she is just as psychotic as Billy at times. So I feel like they leaned into that as the show progressed, and, like, her dark and serious controlling vibe just got more realistic and, like, grounded in actual power as opposed to anything that's, like, even a joke. Like, I'm surprised how real it got. They say she's a control freak, but in a lot of shows like this at the time, you would think neurotic or, like, very controlling, but she's, like, very different compared to other characters because of how she maintains her presence. You know, like, she's never smiling. She never, like, has, like, those crazy stressed vibes like a normal character like that would. Like, she is just always in control, and it's so fun that, like, we have such a unique character to do that. Then we have Grimm. The Grim Reaper is a sinister 9-foot-tall figure in a flowing black robe. He speaks in a deep voice with a distinguished British accent. British? Oh my gosh. That's so funny that they said it was British at first. Once all-powerful, Grimm has been reduced to a pathetic shadow of his former self. Due to a lost bet with Mandy, Grimm can't use his supernatural powers, rendering him a comical figure rather than a scary one. Now he's forced to live with Billy and Mandy and be their best friend. Grimm introduces them to all sorts of bizarre, supernatural, and mythological characters. Even though he's been forced into this relationship with Billy and Mandy against his will, he eventually grows to like them, though he will never admit it. Grimm is only truly happy when he's complaining or making bitter, sarcastic remarks, which is very real. I love that we're coming from the perspective of, like, a midlife crisis, like, especially since you feel bad for him. He's, like, kind of pathetic as being being the Grim Reaper. His early designs are a lot thinner and a lot more like just depressing than necessarily like neurotic. I feel like he took a lot of the character traits we expected to see with Mandy and like became the more straight character. Of course, the fact that it says a British accent early on is like such a red flag because that is not how he ended up at all. And they also mention that like he has to not use his powers because of the bet, when really the bet is just about them being best friends and having to stay in their lives. They must have taken that out so they can actually have supernatural related things. Like I get we have a lot of items he uses. He still has the scythe, but ideally like they never really explain why he never can use his power. I feel like logically like he shouldn't be able to use his powers if he was really subordinate to Mandy. So like they kind of wrote around that just to let him be able to do whatever he wants. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. You have to look at these character designs though. Grim is like one of my favorite characters, and I feel like they really found his grounding in these newer model sheets. Like the very earlier ones when it was Grim and Evil and the original show title, it just felt a little bit different, a little too cartoony. Like the more lighting effects they got, the more green and dark green aesthetics they like leaned into, the more it felt like a distinct show with a specific voice. You'll also notice the music in the show transition from being from Guy Moon, who is the guy who did Fairly Odd Parents, to have more realistic, darker tones in the later episodes. Maxwell Adams talked about this on his Tumblr. If you want to find more behind the scenes, like interesting stuff, he like sells some character model sheets, even storyboard images on his site, which by the way they storyboard this show is so interesting. Of course it's like comedically driven with a lot of the jokes being like pretty detailed and like sketched out, so it is fun to look at this and actually like remember how good the show was animated. We have a little page dedicated to myths and monsters saying Grim, being thousands of years old, has made a lot of acquaintances and enemies. Through their relationship with Grim, Billy and Mandy run into all sorts of aliens, mythological figures who know Grim from the past, which you'll see a lot of. Like, we have some characters that would eventually grow up to be more mainstays on the show. For example, we see, like, the gorilla, the alien. Those characters never come back. Then there's this pig with, like, a man's face on his stomach. What? Yeah, he's just like a little devil. If you actually watch the show, you'll know that they actually get way more disturbing than even these images. Like, these don't even do justice to the show Billy and Mandy. Eris is here with her special apple, which is cool that like they always kept after this. I'm just surprised Haas Delgado isn't in some of these images. But they do a really good job at connecting Grimm's characters to his backstory, like having the Yeti involved, having all these like horror figures, and Grimm always having a relationship with them, whether it's to take their life or something in the old Grim Reaper era of things. Like, it's good how consistent they keep it. Then we have a sizometer. It's funny that they call it here, because in looking at all the characters and their relation to one another, you have to see, like, how each of them size up. And it's cool, because it's, like, it's definitely a consistency thing. You want to keep the continuity really precise, and you could tell, like, how much effort went into these drawings. Like, they are just so particular. They're very, like, the lines are very distinct. It almost feels like a children's book gone wrong. And in a better way than it was originally in the Grim and Evil images. The Infernal main model pack has such a cool, like, image to its front. I wish this was actually published. I mean, it makes sense because this was a model sheet made in 2004, like, way after they had the original sketches for what they wanted the show to be eventually. Yeah, but seeing that all modernized is a lot more interesting. And having the full name, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, it just shows how committed they eventually became to the show. Oh, we have some other images of Harold and the mom, a lot of really cool stuff. Mandy has like a whole turnaround sheet, which shows her at every angle for the animators. Definitely really good. They have her poses, which is a lot of what she does in the first season. Like, it feels like this is like a lot more accurate to what they wanted her to have. Grimm's facial expressions are very specific. They have like Grimm in an extreme pose with his mouth wide open. Sometimes expressions get so extreme that the features won't even fit onto his face. In cases like this, feel free to push eyebrows and lower jaws outside of the character's head shapes. Oh, that's funny. We don't try to draw true perspective on Billy and Mandy, but we do like to fake perspective. Here's a low angle on Grimm's head, showing the curvature of his lower jaw. Oh, cool. And we have a top-down view of Grimm's head. Very, very specific. I like how intense he was on this. Same thing with Billy. It says, like, point of lip can break the shape of the face. It says, like, the point of lip can break the shape of the face or remain inside, but please avoid tangents. Okay. Like, I like to see lower eyelids flat and upper eyelids curved. Ooh, I like that there's like a visual image. There's like a visual communication in this one, especially since this guy is like a well-seasoned animator. Like, he knew exactly how to communicate to other writers. I always wonder if like they have like conversations like this in person, or they're all just writing and drawing separately. Like, that's always something I wondered about back then. And then they explain like how Billy's eyes actually work, why he doesn't have pupils. Oh, and then in comparison to Grimm's eyes, who he just has like holes in his face, but they always have like a way to do each expression. Especially with Grimm's turnarounds, you get to see exactly what they were going for. His poses are my favorite, though. I love seeing his like over-exaggerated faces, like when he's dressed as a clown. And they have side characters too, which I really like. Even like seeing Spurg is a nice one. And I just can't get over how many images there are of Grimm. Like, these are just so fire. Yeah, all around, this whole Bible felt a lot more animated than necessarily story-driven, but it makes sense because, you know, it's a very animated show. I guess Maxwell Adams just had such a particular view of, like, which mythology they're going to lean into this episode, or, like, how Grimm is going to lose his scythe, what Billy's stupid thing he's going to do this time. I just wish we got to see, like, episode premises and how much more writing went into it. If anything, there's, like, not a lot of proof that there was thought brought into this show. But it's impossible for me to believe that, because I've seen these episodes. Like, they're very, very well written. Like, there has to be some more of a written element as opposed to just a storyboard. It's just cool to watch Billy and Mandy unfold in this way. But yeah, if you wanted to find out any more information on these character models, or like old storyboards, even scripts I was able to find, you could just type in Maxwell Adams on Google. Like, you will find all this stuff. He even sells a lot of this with his autograph on it. He's a very considerate animator, and really cares about his fans. So if you want to learn more about him or like his side projects, please check him out online on Tumblr and get answers to the questions you might have about Billy and Mandy, because I know that I'm not answering all of them for you guys. But what do you think of this thing? Do you think it like really replicates what Billy and Mandy inevitably ended up being? Or do you think there was some shocking parts that like didn't align with what the show inevitably created? I wouldn't be surprised, given the first couple seasons and how much experimenting Cartoon Network and Maxwell Adams had to do together before they came up with this amazing 6-season show. But yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts and concerns below. Also, if you have any other ideas for cartoons I could be covering in the future, my comment section is always open. Until next time, everybody, make sure to subscribe to Johnny 2000 or Johnny Tunes if you want to hear any more nostalgic deep dives or commentary on old TV shows. It's a lot of fun to actually sit down with you guys and reminisce together. I feel like a lot of us are like Gen Z or millennials, and we actually really see the creative value in these shows. And I feel like a better storyteller by listening, watching. Like, it's just a lot of fun doing this with you guys. Thank you so much. It means the world to me, and I will see you guys next time.